little bit of an epiphany that I don't think non-procrastinators exist. That's right, I think all of you are procrastinators. Now, you might not all be a mess, like some of us, and some of you may have a healthy relationship with deadlines. But remember, the monkey's sneakiest trick is when the deadlines aren't there. Now, I want to show you one last thing. I call this a life calendar. That's one box for every week of a 90-year life. That's not that many boxes, especially since we've already used a bunch of those. So I think we need to all take a long, hard look at that calendar. And we need to think about what we're really procrastinating on, because term plans, and he wants to take all of that into account, and he wants to just have us do whatever makes sense to be doing right now. Now, sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, like when you're having dinner or going to bed or enjoying well-earned leisure time. That's why there's an overlap. Sometimes they agree. But other times, it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. And for the procrastinator, that conflict tends to end a certain way every time, leaving him spending a lot of time in this orange zone, an easy and fun place that's entirely out of the make sense circle. I call it the dark playground. Now, the dark playground is a place that all of you procrastinators out there know very well. It's where leisure activities happen at times when leisure activities are not supposed to be happening. The fun you have in the dark playground isn't actually fun because it's completely unearned and the air is filled with guilt, dread, anxiety, self-hatred, all those good procrastinator feelings. And the question is, in this situation with the monkey behind the wheel, how does the procrastinator ever get himself over here to this blue zone? A less pleasant place, but where really important things happen. Well, it turns out that the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone who's always looking down on him and watching over him in his darkest moments, someone called the panic monster. Now, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. And importantly, he's the only thing that the monkey is terrified of. Now, he became very relevant in my life pretty recently because the people of TED reached out to me about 6 months ago and invited me to do a TED Talk. Now, of course, I said yes. It's always been a dream of mine to have done a TED Talk in the past. But in the middle of all this excitement, the rational decision maker seemed to have something else on his mind. He was saying, are we clear on what we just accepted? Do we get what's going to be now happening one day in the future? We need to sit down and work on this right now. And the monkey said, totally agree, but also let's just open Google Earth and let's zoom into the bottom of India, like 200 feet above the ground, and we're going to scroll up for 2.5 hours till we get to the top of the country so we can get a better feel for India. So that's what we did that day. As 6 months turned into 4, and then 2, and then 1, the people of TED decided to release the speakers. And I opened up the website, and there was my face staring right back at me, and guess who woke up? So the panic monster starts losing his mind, and a few seconds later, the whole system's in mayhem. And the monkey, who, remember, he's terrified of the panic monster, boom, he's up the tree. And finally, the rational decision maker can take the wheel and I can start working on the talk. Now, the panic monster explains all kinds of pretty insane procrastinated behavior, like how someone like me could spend 2 weeks unable to start the opening sentence of a paper and then miraculously find the unbelievable work ethic to stay up all night and write 8 pages. And this entire situation with the 3 characters, this is the procrastinator's system. It's not pretty, but in the end, it works. And this is what I decided to write about on the blog just a couple years ago. Now, when I did, I was amazed by the response. Literally thousands of emails came in from all different kinds of people, from all over the world, doing all different kinds of things. These were people who were nurses and bankers and painters and engineers and lots of PhD students. And they were all writing saying the same thing. I have this problem too. But what struck me was the contrast between the light tone of the post and the heaviness of these emails. These people were writing with intense frustration about what procrastination had done to their lives, about what this monkey had done to them. And I thought about this, and I said, well, if the procrastinator system works, then what's going on? Why are all these people in such a dark place? Well, it turns out that there's two kinds of procrastination. Everything I've talked about today, the examples I've given, they all have deadlines. And when there's deadlines, the effects of procrastination are contained to the short term because the panic monster gets involved. But there's a second kind of procrastination that happens in situations when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, there's no deadlines on those things at first because nothing's happening at first, not until you've gone out and done the hard work to get some momentum, to get things going. There's also all kinds of important things outside of your career that don't involve any deadlines, like seeing your family or exercising and taking care of your health, working on your relationship or getting out of a relationship that isn't working. Now, if the procrastinator's only mechanism of doing these hard things is the panic monster, that's a problem because in all of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. He has nothing to wake up for. So the effects of procrastination, they're not contained. They just extend outward forever. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible and much less talked about than the funnier, short-term, deadline-based kind. It's usually suffered quietly and privately, and it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness and regrets. And I thought, that's why these people are emailing, and that's why they're in such a bad place. It's not that they're cramming for some project. It's that long-term procrastination has made them feel like a spectator at times in their own lives. The frustration was not that they couldn't achieve their dreams, it's that they weren't even able to start chasing them. So I read these emails and I had a little bit of an epiphany that I don't think non-procrastinators exist. That's right, I think all of you are procrastinators. Now, you might not all be a mess, like some of us, and some of you may have a healthy relationship with deadlines. But remember, the monkey's sneakiest trick is when the deadlines aren't there. Now, I want to show you one last thing. I call this a life calendar. That's one box for every week of a 90-year life. That's not that many boxes, especially since we've already used a bunch of those. So I think we need to all take a long, hard look at that calendar. And we need to think about what we're really procrastinating on, because everyone is procrastinating on something in life. We need to stay aware of the instant gratification monkey. That's a job for all of us. And because there's not that many boxes on there, it's a job that should probably start today. Well, maybe not today, but sometime soon. Thank you.
few years ago, I got one of those spam emails. And it managed to get through my spam filter. I'm not quite sure how, but it's turned up in my inbox, and it was from a guy called Solomon Odonka. I know. It went like this. It said, hello, James Veitch. I have an interesting business proposal I want to share with you, Solomon. Now, my hand was kind of hovering on the delete button. Right? As you are, I was looking at my phone. I thought, I could just delete this. Or I could do what I think we've all always wanted to do. And I said, Solomon, your email intrigues me. And the game was afoot. He said, dear James Veitch, we shall be shipping gold to you. You will earn 10% of any gold you distribute. So I knew I was dealing with a professional. I said, how much is it worth? He said, we will start with a smaller quantity. I was like, ah. And then he said, of 25 kilograms. The worth should be about 2.5 million. I said, Solomon, if we're going to do it, let's go big. I can handle it. How much gold do you have? He said, it's not a matter of how much gold. How much is you're capable of handling? What? We can start with 50 kilograms as a trial shipment. I said, 50 kilograms? There's no point doing this at all. No, so shipping at least a metric ton. So what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a hedge fund executive bank manager. This isn't the first time I've shipped bullion, my friend. No, no, no. Then I started to panic. I was like, look, where are you based? I don't know about you, but I think we're going via the postal service. It ought to be signed for. Right, that's a lot of gold. He said, it will not be easy to convince my company to do a larger quantity shipment. And I said, Solomon, I'm completely with you on this one. I'm putting together a visual for you to take into the board meeting. Hold tight. This is what I sent Solomon. I don't know if we have any statisticians in the house, but there's definitely something going on. I said, Solomon, attach this email, you'll find a helpful chart. I've had one of my assistants run the numbers. We need to be shipping as much gold as possible. There's always a moment where they try to tug your heartstrings, and this was it for Solomon. He said, I will be so much happy if the deal goes well, because I'm going to get a very good commission as well. And I said, that's amazing. What are you going to spend your cut on? And he said, on real estate. What about you? You. I thought about it for a long time. And I said one word. Hummus. It's going places. I was in Sainsbury's the other day and there are like 30 different varieties. Also, you can cut up carrots and you can dip them. Have you ever done that? Solomon! He said, I have to go to bed now. Till tomorrow. Have sweet dreams. I didn't know what to say. I said, bonsoir, my golden nugget. Bonsoir. Guys, you have to understand, this has been going for like weeks, albeit hitherto the greatest weeks of my life, but I had to knock it on the head. It was getting a bit out of hand. Friends were saying to me, James, do you want to come out for a drink? I was like, I can't, mate. I'm expecting an email about some gold. You know? So I figured I had to knock it on the head. I had to take it to a ridiculous conclusion. So I thought I concocted a plan. I said, look, Solomon, I'm concerned about security. When we email each other, we need to use a code. And he agreed. And I said, Solomon, I spent all night coming up with this code. We need to use it in all further correspondence. Lawyer. Gummy bear. Bank, cream egg. Legal, fizzy cola bottle, claim peanut M&Ms, documents, jelly beans, Western Union. Guys, a giant gummy lizard. I knew these were all words they used, right? I said, please call me Kit Kat in all further correspondence. I didn't hear back. I thought, I've gone too far. I've gone too far. So I had to backpedal a little bit. I said, look, Solomon, is the deal still on? Kit Kat. Because you have to be consistent. Then I did get an email back from him. He said, the business is on, I'm trying, blah, 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 blah. I said, dude, you have to use the code. What followed is the greatest email I've ever received. I'm not joking. This is what turned up in my inbox. This was a good day. The business is on. And I'm trying to raise the balance for the gummy bear. So he can submit all the needed fizzy cola bottle jelly beans to the cream egg for the peanut M&Ms process to start. Send £1,500 via a giant gummy lizard. And that was so much fun, right? That it got me thinking, like, what would happen if I just spent as much time as I could replying to as many scam emails as I could? And that's what I've been doing for 3 years on your behalf. Yeah. Let me tell you, crazy stuff happens when you start replying to scam emails. It's really difficult, and I highly recommend we do it. I don't think what I'm doing is mean, right? You know, there are a lot of people out there who do mean things to scammers. I don't think what I'm doing. All I think I'm doing all I'm doing is wasting their time. Right? And I think any time they're spending with me is time they're not spending scamming vulnerable adults out of their savings, right? If you're going to do this, and I highly recommend you do, get yourself a pseudonymous email address. Don't use your own email address, because that's exactly what I was doing at the start, and it was a nightmare. Because, you know, I'd wake up in the morning and have like 1,000 emails about penis enlargements, you know, only one of which was a legitimate response to a medical question. But I tell you what, though, guys, I tell you what, any day is a good day. Any day is a good day if you receive an email that begins like this. I am Winnie Mandela, the second wife of Nelson Mandela, the former South African president. I was like, oh, that Winnie Mandela. I know so many. I need to transfer $45 million out of the country because of my husband Nelson's health condition. Let that sink in. She sent me this, which is hysterical. And this looks fairly legitimate. This is a letter of authorization, but to be honest, if there's nothing written on it, it's just a shape. I said, Winnie, I'm really sorry to hear of this. Given that Nelson died 3 months ago, I describe his health condition as... That's the worst health condition you can have, not being alive. She said, kindly comply with my banker's instructions. One love. I said, of course, no woman, no cry. She said, my banker would need transfer of $3,000. One love. I said, no problemo. I shot the sheriff. Thank you.
This story starts, I was at a friend's house and she had on her shelf a copy of the DSM manual, which is the Manual of Mental Disorders. It lists every known mental disorder. And it used to be, back in the 50s, a very slim pamphlet, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's 886 pages long, and it lists currently 374 mental disorders. So I was leafing through it, wondering if I had any mental disorders, and it turns out I've got 12. I've got generalized anxiety disorder, which is a given. I've got nightmare disorder, which is categorized if you have recurrent dreams of being pursued or declared a failure. And all my dreams involve people chasing me down the street going, "You're a failure." I've got parent-child relational problems, which I blame my parents for. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. And I've got malingering. And I think it's actually quite rare to have both malingering and generalized anxiety disorder, because malingering tends to make me feel very anxious. Anyway, I was looking through this book wondering if I was much crazier than I thought I was, or maybe it's not a good idea to diagnose yourself with a mental disorder if you're not a trained professional. Or maybe the psychiatry profession has a kind of strange desire to label what's essentially normal human behavior as a mental disorder. I didn't know which of these things was true, but I thought it was kind of interesting, and I thought maybe I should meet a critic of psychiatry to get their view, which is how I ended up having lunch with the Scientologists. It was a man called Brian who runs a crack team of Scientologists who are determined to destroy psychiatry wherever it lies. They're called the CCHR. And I said to him, can you prove to me that psychiatry is a pseudoscience that can't be trusted? And he said, yes, we can prove it to you. And I said, how? And he said, we can introduce you to Tony. And I said, who's Tony? And he said, Tony's in Broadmoor. Now, Broadmoor is Broadmoor Hospital. It used to be known as the Broadmoor Asylum for the Criminally Insane. It's where they send the serial killers and the people who can't help themselves. And I said to Brian, well, what did Tony do? And he said, hardly anything. He beat someone up or something, and he decided to fake madness to get out of a prison sentence. But he faked it too well, and now he's stuck in Broadmoor, and nobody will believe he's sane. Do you want us to try and get you into Broadmoor to meet Tony? So I said, yes, please. So I got the train to Broadmoor. I began to yawn uncontrollably around Kempton Park, which apparently is what dogs also do when anxious. They yawn uncontrollably. And we got to Broadmoor, and I got taken through gate after gate after gate after gate into the wellness centre, which is where you get to meet the patients. It looks like a giant Hampton Inn. It's all peach and pine and calming colours, and the only bold colours are the reds of the panic buttons. And the patients started drifting in, and they were quite overweight and wearing sweatpants and quite docile looking, and Brian, the Scientologist, whispered to me, they're medicated, which to the Scientologist is like the worst evil in the world, but I'm thinking it's probably a good idea. And then Brian said, here's Tony. And a man was walking in, and he wasn't overweight. He was in very good physical shape, and he wasn't wearing sweatpants. He was wearing a pinstripe suit, and he had his arm outstretched, like someone out of The Apprentice. He looked like a man who wanted to wear an outfit that would convince me that he was very sane. And he sat down, and I said, so is it true that you faked your way in here? And he said, yep, absolutely. I beat someone up when I was 17, and I was in prison awaiting trial, and my cellmate said to me, you know what you have to do? Fake madness. Tell him you're mad, you'll get sent to some cushy hospital, nurses will bring you pizzas, you'll have your own PlayStation. So I said, well, how did you do it? He said, well, I asked to see the prison psychiatrist, and I'd just seen a film called Crash, in which people get sexual pleasure from crashing cars into walls. So I said to the psychiatrist, I get sexual pleasure from crashing cars into walls. And I said, what else? He said, oh yeah, I told the psychiatrist that I wanted to watch women as they died because it would make me feel more normal. And I said, where'd you get that from? He said, oh, from a biography of Ted Bundy that they had at the prison library. Anyway, he faked madness too well, he said, and they didn't send him to some cushy hospital. They sent him to Broadmoor. And the minute he got there, he said he took one look at the place, asked to see the psychiatrist, said, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm not mentally ill. I said, how long have you been here for? He said, well, if I'd just done my time in prison for the original crime, I'd have got 5 years. I've been in Broadmoor for 12 years. Tony said that it's a lot harder to convince people you're sane than it is to convince them you're crazy. He said, I thought the best way to seem normal would be to talk to people normally about normal things like football and what's on TV. I subscribed to New Scientist, and recently they had an article about how the US Army was training bumblebees to sniff out explosives. So I said to a nurse, did you know that the US Army's training bumblebees to sniff out explosives? When I read my medical notes, I saw they'd written, believes bees can sniff out explosives. He said, you know, they're always looking out for non-verbal clues to my mental state, but how do you sit in a sane way? How do you cross your legs in a sane way? It's just impossible. You know, when Tony said that to me, I thought to myself, am I sitting like a journalist? Am I crossing my legs like a journalist? He said, you know, I've got the Stockwell Strangler on one side of me, and I've got the tiptoe through the tulips rapist on the other side of me. So I tend to stay in my room a lot because I find them quite frightening. And they take that as a sign of madness. They say it proves that I'm aloof and grandiose. So only in Broadmoor would not wanting to hang out with serial killers be a sign of madness. Anyway, he seemed completely normal to me, but what did I know? And when I got home, I emailed his clinician, Anthony Maiden, that had seemed quite cliche to begin with, just vanished the minute he got to Broadmoor. However, we have assessed him, and we've determined that what he is a psychopath. And in fact, faking madness is exactly the kind of cunning and manipulative act of a psychopath. It's on the checklist, cunning, manipulative. So faking your brain going wrong is evidence that your brain has gone wrong. And I spoke to other experts, and they said the pinstripe suit, classic psychopath, speaks to items 1 and 2 on the checklist: glibness, superficial charm, a grandiose sense of self-worth. I said, I want to hang out with the other patients. Classic psychopath, it speaks to grandiosity and also lack of empathy. So all the things that had seemed most normal about Tony was evidence, according to his clinician, that he was mad in this new way. He was a psychopath. And his clinician said to me, if you want to know more about psychopaths, you can go on a psychopath spotting course run by Robert Hare, who invented the psychopath checklist. So I did. I went on a psychopath spotting course, and I am now a certified, and I have to say extremely adept, psychopath spotter. So here's the statistics. 1 in 100 regular people is a psychopath. So there's 1,500 people in this room. 15 of you are psychopaths. although that figure rises to 4% of CEOs and business leaders. So I think there's a very good chance there's about 30 or 40 psychopaths in this room. It could be carnage by the end of the night. Hare said the reason why is because capitalism at its most ruthless rewards psychopathic behavior, the lack of empathy, the glibness, cunning, manipulative. In fact, capitalism, perhaps at its most remorseless, is a physical manifestation of psychopathy. It's like a form of psychopathy that's come down to affect us all. And Hare said to me, you know what, forget about some guy at Broadmoor who may or may not have fake madness. Who cares? That's not a big story. The big story, he said, is corporate psychopathy. You want to go and interview yourself some corporate psychopaths. So I gave it a try. I wrote to the Enron people. I said, can I come and interview you in prison to find out if you're psychopaths? They didn't reply. So I changed tack. I emailed Chainsaw Al Dunlap, the asset stripper from the 1990s. He would come into failing businesses and close down 30% of the workforce, just turn American towns into ghost towns. And I emailed him and I said, I believe you may